Planning Commission meeting of my 35th birthday, February 23rd.
Happy birthday.
The time is 6:30 p.m. And Charlie, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Dram.
Here.
Commissioner Gitzoni.
Here.
Commissioner Henry.
Here.
Commissioner Wax.
Here.
Vice Chair Simons.
Here.
And Chair Chafe has an excused absence this evening. We do have one vacancy on the commission, so we have a quorum of 5 commissioners present.
Great. Okay. Can we get the introductory remarks, part of the COVID script?
Certainly. I would like to state for the record that this meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to California Assembly Bill 361. The city was previously complying with the Brown Act orders issued by the governor, which were aimed at containing the novel coronavirus and which expired on September 30th, 2021. AB 361 gives local agencies the authority to continue to host virtual meetings until January 1st, 2024. As long as California is still under a governor-declared state of emergency, which, as you know, is due to end in 1 week. In order to continue meetings subject to this exemption to the Brown Act, the Planning Commission must make findings by majority vote no later than 30 days after it starts using the exemption and every 30 days thereafter, and will do so at this meeting and until the governor lists the state of emergency. City Hall is open to the public during regular business hours, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. The planning and building counter has different hours, so please check or make an appointment before visiting. The agenda states that the public may view this meeting that is being live streamed online and on ETV channel 27 and provide comment by submitting an online comment form, which will then be read into the record by staff. The comment form can be accessed by going to our main City of Emeryville Planning Commission webpage and clicking on the link entitled Submit an Online Speaker Card. The public also has the option of participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom and may provide public comment during the meeting using the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you are calling in, press *9 on your phone. The Zoom call-in information was provided on the posted agenda as well as via e-notification and on social media. At this time, Vice Chair Simons, I would like to go to item 3 and ask for a motion to approve the resolution declaring the need for the Planning Commission to continue to meet remotely in order to ensure the health and safety of the public, which contains the required AB 361 findings.
You cannot hear.
You are muted, Vice Chair Simons.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm happy to make the motion. Yep.
I second it.
Right, moved by Vice Chair Simons and seconded by Commissioner Dram. On the motion, Commissioner Dram.
Aye.
Commissioner Gitzoni.
Aye.
Commissioner Henry.
Aye.
Commissioner Wax.
Aye.
Vice Chair Simons.
Aye.
And Chair Chafe is absent. So 5 ayes, the resolution is approved. Thank you. Would you like me to read the public comment portion of the?
Yes, Charlie, can you read the general public comments?
Sure. Now is the time for the public comment portion of this meeting. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to items not on this agenda should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for me to read your comments into the record. If you are participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you are calling in, press *9 on your phone. At this time, I will check to see whether any comments have been received via the online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hand to make audio comments. Let me see. I do not have any online comment cards, and there is no one in the audience with their hand raised. So it looks like no one wants to make a comment.
Great. Okay. Now the approval of the action minutes. Does anybody have any comments on?
You're closing the public comment period.
Oh, sorry. Let's close the public comment period.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Now the action minutes.
Great. Now the action minutes. Do any commissioners have any comments on the minutes? No? Okay. Well, can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
Yes. Second.
All right, moved by Commissioner Gitzoni and seconded by Commissioner Henry. Commissioner Dram?
Aye.
Commissioner Gitzoni?
Aye.
Commissioner Henry?
Aye.
Commissioner Wax,
Aye.
Vice Chair Simons,
Aye.
and Chair Chafe is absent. So 5 ayes, the minutes are approved.
Great. And Charlie, can we get our report from you?
Yes, you may.
Report.
Thank you. First, with regard to recent city council actions, the council has had 2 meetings since your last meeting, and those council meetings were on February 7th and February 21st. On February 7th, the council took action to eliminate the Bay Shellmound Assessment District, which had been adopted in the 1990s to pay for the vehicular bridge over the railroad next to IKEA and the construction of 40th and Shellmound Streets connecting to the bridge. The bonds have now been paid off, so it is no longer necessary to collect fees for it with building permit applications, as had been done for the last several decades. This was a real burden on the building division, so we are glad that we no longer have to collect this fee. The council also approved a hosting agreement for an electric scooter racing series to be held in the fall. The e-scooter championship is the world's first electric scooter racing series. It includes 30 professional teams that ride high-performance electric scooters that reach speeds in excess of 60 miles an hour on tracks sited in urban areas that are typically 1/3 to 1/2 mile in length. The e-scooter championship has produced races in London, Switzerland, and France, and the racing series in Emeryville will be its inaugural event in the United States. The agreement calls for races in 2023, 2024, and 2025, with the first planned to be this coming October. The race course location has yet to be determined. On February 21st, the council interviewed applicants for the city council seat that was vacated by the resignation of Councilmember Ali Medina in January. After holding the interviews, the council voted unanimously to appoint Sukhdeep Kaur, who was then sworn into office and participated in the rest of the meeting. So we now have a full complement of 5 city council members once again. The council also approved an application to the California Department of Housing and Community Development for the Pro Housing Incentive Pilot Program. This program provides funding to accelerate affordable housing production and preservation and requires applicants to have submitted a pro-housing designation application. And on a related note, we submitted our application yesterday. The council authorized the issuance of up to $50 million in affordable housing bonds, as was approved by the voters via Measure C on June 2nd, 2018. The council had previously approved an expenditure plan for the city's affordable housing funds, including these bonds, in March of 2021. The council approved a noise waiver for nighttime construction at the railroad grade crossings at 65th, 66th, and 67th Streets for a 7 consecutive day period on dates to be determined between February 21st and November 17th. This work is related to the Railroad Quiet Zone project, which will allow trains to refrain from blowing their horns at those crossings in the future. And the council adopted a resolution terminating the city's declaration of local emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic effective February 28th, coinciding with the governor's lifting of the California state of emergency. In other news, I want to let you know that there will be a ribbon cutting ceremony for the redesigned Davenport Park, which is on Powell Street next to Trader Vic's restaurant, on Friday, March 3rd at 4 p.m. On Tuesday evening this week, I sent you all a link to the Capital Improvement Priority Survey. I hope you all got that. As was noted at your study session in January, the CIP will be coming back to the Commission later this year for a determination of conformity to the general plan. However, there will be no further opportunities for the Commission to weigh in at a study session on the projects to be included in the CIP, so this survey is your opportunity to have input to the project list as members of the public. Anyone interested in participating in this survey can access it at www.emeryville.org/CIP. And finally, I want to remind you, as I'm sure you don't need to be reminded, that starting with our next meeting on March 23rd, the Planning Commission meetings will be in person in the City Council chambers. You can all look forward to that. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Okay, it doesn't seem like does anybody have any questions, or we're good? Great, thank you, Charlie. Okay, so let's see. Next on our agenda, we have disclosure of ex parte communications. Does anybody have anything to disclose? Okay, great. So next we have item 8.1, general plan annual progress report.
I believe this presentation will be made by Associate Planner Navarre Oaks with assistance from Valerie Bernardo, our housing coordinator. Is that right, Navarre?
That is correct. Well,
Okay.
I believe the bulk of the presentation really is Valerie. So I'll be beginning the presentation, which will go over the general plan portion, and then we'll head into the housing element annual report update that Valerie will present on. So I will share screen here. Oops, I have too many pop-ups to see what I'm doing. There we go. Thanks for your patience. All right. Good evening, everybody. So as Charlie said, we'll be presenting the 2022 General Plan Annual Progress Report. This is required to be submitted to the state every year to go over the general plan, the housing element, and the housing and successor annual report, how we're doing on everything, if we're achieving what we said we were striving towards. So I don't know why there is a blank space there. That is weird. But anyway, the general plan amendments this year were the housing element, the adoption of the housing element that replaced the previous housing element. That was the only general plan amendment. And then what it's supposed to say below this is what were the big development projects that were approved. And so there is a marketplace R&D final development plan that was approved for parcels A and B. There's 68 units of affordable housing at 4300 San Pablo, which is our second SB 35 project. 9 ADUs were approved on 8 different sites. All of those were on the RM, except for 2 that were in former retail space on Emery Street in a mixed-use building. So diversity of projects going on in the city, as the Planning Commission is well aware. Oh, that's weird. Okay, didn't see that coming. Moving along. So implementation of the 79 general plan actions. So 16 actions were completed prior to 2021. 58 actions progress were made. We're going to go over those in a little bit of detail by general plan chapter. And then 5 actions we weren't able to make progress on this year. And so that's locating a new police facility, Greenway Creek and water feature improvements, developing new sign regs, doing a trail at the Emeryville Crescent that hasn't been studied yet. And we have not been holding any farmers markets. So other than that, 58 actions progress out of 79, that's pretty darn good. So for land use, planning regulations were amended to make the sidewalk, cafe, and parklet regulations that were adopted for COVID-19 permanent. And then there was also aforementioned projects for R&D, office and lab, and residential projects were approved. There was also assistance provided to locate 18 businesses and retain 58 businesses in the city. That work was done by the Economic Development and Housing Department, in which that department also held roundtable discussions to get business input regarding city policies, programs, and marketing. So for transportation, we continued to develop the active transportation plan. And then there was the groundbreaking on the Quiet Zone project, very exciting. And the city used ACT funding for multiple projects this year, including annual project paving, the South Bayfront pedestrian and bicycle bridge project, that railroad quiet zone I mentioned, Emeryville round functions, and also an ideas grant for deployment of enhanced arterials in the city. So for parks, public facilities, services, Point Emery, the construction was completed for the shoreline protection at that location. Davenport Park construction began on the peninsula. Planning, there weren't any actual CERT events held, but planning occurred for CERT trainings to resume in 23. Those have been put on hold because of COVID. And then for community events, there was the Harvest Festival, there was a holiday tree lighting, and very exciting, there was a grant for a free after-school program, and that led to enrollment in the after-school program at community services doubling, more than doubling. For urban design, some of that in action that we've been seeing here. Planning Commission, again, you are familiar. Bay Street grocery store includes a new pedestrian plaza and redesign and closing off to vehicular traffic for a portion of Bay Street. The Emery Station Overland project, the large office R&D project over there at Overland and 63rd. That includes the transformation of Overland Avenue and between 63rd and 64th into a ped bike facility. And there's also a new citywide ped bike wayfinding program that's just got kicked off that BPAC is starting to review and will also be incorporating public art elements. So conservation, safety, and noise. There was a renovation of the Pelco building. That's at 1550 Park. If you haven't seen that, you can stroll down and check that out. That building has been repurposed. That's a significant building, and it's brick. I believe it's over 100 years old, and it now incorporates public art along the front railing. A sidewalk was complete in front of it with lighting that didn't previously exist. And the building's just been redone in a beautiful way to keep those significant features that are identified in the planning regulations. There was also a contract for a large inline trash separator device, and that's scheduled for construction to begin this year. And then that quiet zone project. You'll see that that comes up in multiple ways. And then for sustainability, the city continued to work on many elements of the climate action plan. So that largely goes with active transportation and new ped bike facilities planned and installed, and electrifying transportation in new buildings. So over the housing element portion, I'll have Valerie take it away, and I'll be here for questions later on as well. Thanks.
Good evening, commissioners. So I'm going to go over the housing element portion of the annual update. Within the housing element progress report, we're going to talk about some applications that came in, entitlement permits, the completion of projects. We'll go over our progress related to the regional housing needs allocation. We'll look at the implementation of some of our housing element programs. This year's annual progress report had some additional requirements in it that were not in previous reports. So you'll see in the packet that you received, there's information on surplus land, whether or not we did anything related to commercial density, our status with our LEAP grant. There's a variety of additional spreadsheets. I'm not going to go into those additional spreadsheets because there wasn't a whole lot to report. Instead, I'll focus on the first three bullets. Next slide.
Sorry, Valerie, it's going to happen. There we go.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so when it comes to our housing development applications, there were 16 applications that were submitted in 2022 for a total of 240 residential units. 13 of those came from accessory dwelling units, of which 9 of those were approved for or still pending. We also had 3 multifamily development projects. One being 5801 Christie Avenue. They're proposing 94 units. That project is still pending. 4300 San Pablo. It's a 100% affordable housing project. They proposed 68 units. That application and entitlement has been approved. And then 9 Anchor Drive. They were proposing 54 units. That application actually was withdrawn in January. So related to the proposed affordability of all the applications that came in 2022, you'll see a chart at the bottom of the page. 73 of those units were very low, 8 were low, 11 moderate, 148 were market. Next slide. So when it comes to what entitlements were actually issued, we had 10 properties totaling 78 units that did receive entitlements. 10 of those were accessory dwelling units, and the other one was the 4300 San Pablo project, which I just spoke of. All of the accessory dwelling units are identified as being above market, and 67 of the 68 units at 4300 San Pablo will be set aside for very low income households, with 1 unit going to a property manager, which makes it a market rate unit. Next slide. On the building permit side, we had 4 projects that were that received a building permit in 2022, resulting in 24 housing units. 5 of those were accessory dwelling units. 2 of those were additional units on existing properties. We also had Baker Metal Live Work project that received its building permit for 17 units, and Ocean Townhomes also received their building permit for 3 units. For a total of the 24 units, none of these projects are set aside for affordable housing, so all of them will produce market rate housing. Next slide. When it comes to our certificate of occupancy, we had 7 projects totaling 203 units. 2 of those were accessory dwelling units. We had the Emory Buildings 1 and Building 2 that received their certificate of occupancy. 53 of the units in Building 1 are deed restricted. I'm sorry, there's 53 units in Building 1, 108 units in Building 2. There are deed restriction related to a set aside of affordable units within each one of those buildings. Ocean Townhomes also received its certificate of occupancy for 5 units, and then Ocean Lofts. Within the affordability of all the projects that were complete, we had 10 very low, 12 low, 11 moderate, 170 market, for a total of the 203 units that received their CO. Next slide. So where is the city in regards to our progress towards the RENA? The regional allocation plan actually will expire in January of 2023, which was last month. So based on the end of the project reporting period of 2022, we had permits issued for 1,300 out of the 1,498 units that our goal was in order to produce, putting us 198 units short. Now that's looking at the overall total of all the units. If you look at the allocation of units we were supposed to hit per income category, we had a shortfall in our very low, low, and moderate. We were around 42% meeting the requirement for very low units, about 23% for low units, and about 23% for our moderate. So we were slightly short. We did overperform on our market rate units, which is how we got so close to meeting our overall goal. I think we're at a total of about 88% for the whole RENA. January still could be counted if we have additional units to add, but that would show up in next year's report. Next slide. So when it comes to the implementation of our housing element programs, we have 54 programs. I'm not going to provide an update on each one of those programs. Instead, I'm going to go through each one of the 7 goals, and I'm going to highlight one program and activity that occurred within that one program associated with that goal. So our first goal was to preserve and improve the existing neighborhoods and housing stock. One of the programs under that goal is related to community preservation. So we reported that there were 14 residential code enforcement cases that were opened in 2022. Those cases were related to either maintenance issues, work that occurred during unauthorized time, or the fact that there was no permit on site. 5 of those 5 cases were closed. They were closed because 3 of them were abated, and then 2 of them were found to have no violation. Next slide. Within our goal number 2, which is to encourage the development of affordable housing for extremely low, low, and very low income households, program H222 is to provide assistance with city assisted developments. So towards that end, 2 requests for qualifications of proposals were issued in 2022. One was for the Adeline Sites property. Within that RFP, there was a goal to develop housing for extremely low and very low income individuals. And within the Christie Sites RFP, the goal was to maximize the number of housing units affordable to extremely low all the way up to market rate housing units. Next slide. The third goal is to promote the development of affordable housing for persons with special needs. Program H321 is our support of the Everyone Home homeless strategy. The city continued to work with Operation Dignity to provide outreach through our annual contract to homeless individuals in Emeryville. We have a contract with St. Vincent de Paul to provide shelter beds. And we also partnered with Berkeley Food and Housing and the Dwight Way Shelter to provide shelter beds for persons who are experiencing homelessness in Emeryville. Next slide. Program H426 is to promote quality and diversity in new housing. And that is within goal 4 to provide a wide variety of housing types appropriate for households at a variety of socioeconomic levels and different lifestyles. We continue to work on our development of the objective standards. It's something that the staff has been working on for a while. I think hopefully towards the end of this year, if not early next year, you guys will actually have those objective design standards to come for you for approval. Next slide. Goal 5 is to promote equal opportunity in housing. Program H511 is regarding providing fair housing counseling, tenant landlord mediation, and legal referrals. We actually contract with two entities, one being ECHO and the second one being East Bay Community Law Center, or EBCLC as the slide says. ECHO does provide fair housing counseling. That contract is actually through an allocation of community development block grant funding through the county. Through their fair housing contract, they have counseled 22 people in Emeryville. We also have a contract with ECHO to provide tenant landlord relations related to our just cause and tenant relations ordinance. Through that, they have provided or have been in contact with 24 people in 2022. The East Bay Community Law Center has provided legal intake to 14 people in Emeryville, and they held a tenant rights workshop where 6 people from Emeryville attended. Next slide. Goal number 6 is the adoption and implementation of our city design guidelines for family-friendly housing. We've had 3 developments that are underway with Planning Commission in 2022 that reviewed those family-friendly guidelines. 5850 Shell Mound Way, they're proposing 10% studios, 53% 2-bedroom units, and 16.7% 3-bedroom units, which meets our family-friendly guidelines. 5801 Shell Mound, 5801 to 5861 Christie Avenue is proposing 8.5% studios, 36.2 2-bedroom units, and 17% 3-bedroom units, which also meets the guidelines. And then 4300 San Pablo, they actually requested a waiver of the family-friendly unit mix requirements, which was granted because it is a 100% affordable housing project that is designated for seniors. So that waiver was granted on that project. Next slide. And then our last goal is to promote environmental responsibility and long-term sustainability in residential developments related to brownfields, promoting green and healthy housing. Our program H711 is our brownfield assessment loan and cleanup loan program. And what we wanted to report for this year is that we did have an agreement with the EPA to revise an existing agreement we have with them to provide $2.4 million in brownfield assistance to the city. And staff has done a preliminary review and determined that the Christie Avenue Sites project, the Adeline Sites, and Site B all have been determined to be eligible to access those funds to do any cleanup if necessary. Next slide. Okay, the second part of my presentation is going to focus on our Housing Successor Annual Report. The annual report is in regards to our low and moderate income housing asset funds. The city of Emeryville is what's known as a housing successor. The funding that used to be provided through the redevelopment agency is now flowing over to the city. So as being a housing successor, we are required to provide an annual report with our housing element, just detailing the utilization of those funds and things that we have accomplished. So next slide, please. So we had about $932,000 in deposits in fiscal year 21-22. 729, the bulk of those deposits did come from homeowners who paid off of their loans or providing us in fees related to their payoffs or refinancing, which left us with an ending balance of a little bit more than $23 million. We expended $910,000 this year. All of that money went into one project, which was 3600 San Pablo, another 100% affordable housing project. 368,000 of those funds were used towards units that are designated for low-income households. 81,000 went to units that'll go towards very low, and 460 went towards extremely low-income housing units. We hold real property asset values at a little bit over $17 million. We have loans and grants receivables that are outstanding, totaling about $16 million, and we have a little bit over $5 million in unencumbered funds. There's a requirement that we do an analysis of our unencumbered funds compared to deposits over the last 4 years to determine if we have excess surplus. And doing that analysis, it has come out that we do have excess surplus, which basically means we have more unencumbered funds available than the last 4 year of deposits, which means we have money that needs to be encumbered. That issue actually will be resolved because we have committed over $5 million towards 3600 San Pablo. Those funds just were not committed in the system in time in order to show up and show us with less unencumbered funds. So that issue will be resolved and we will not be out of compliance next year. Next slide. We do have 2 sites that are remaining low-income housing asset properties. These are properties that were acquired with the redevelopment funds. The first one is the Adeline sites. We are required under law to initiate development by September 1st, 2022. We did meet that requirement because we did issue the RFP. So we are in the pre-development stage for the redevelopment of the Adeline site. The second one is Christie Avenue site. We also met the requirement there. The RFP was not only issued last year, but we actually selected the developer as well. So that project is also in pre-development. We'll continue to show information related to both of these projects until the projects are complete, but we did meet the initiation deadline. Next slide. We're required to do an analysis to ensure that we are not producing more housing than 50% of the units within the city. And so in looking at the past 10 years, we have not, 50% of our housing stock is not made up of senior housing. So we are in compliance with that requirement. We're also required to ensure that we're expending at least 30% of our funds on housing units that are for extremely low income people. And we do meet that requirement, so we're in compliance. And then the last thing we're required to report on is the number of home ownership units within our portfolio. We have 151 units remaining in the portfolio. The portfolio is currently being managed by Hello Housing, and they assist us with providing compliance and processing requests for subordinations and loan payoffs. We did not lose any units, I believe, within this fiscal year either related to the housing successor units. Next slide. That's the end of my presentation. So Navarre and I are available for any questions if you guys have any. And if there's a recommendation to go towards council.
Thank you so much, Valerie. That was a really great presentation. So let's take questions and comments from commissioners.
Clarifying questions first, right?
Clarifying questions.
Before we open up for public comment.
Yeah. Does anybody have any? No? Okay. I have a couple of questions here. It looks, so on the housing element annual progress report, I think it looks like this is slide 15. Obviously, like virtually every other city in the Bay Area, we're falling way behind on our very low and moderate outcomes. Are there Bay Area averages that we could throw up next to those columns? Just because, I don't know, I'd love to know, are we above average, below average? These goals are so impossible, they're basically meaningless. But I'd love to get better data on how we're doing compared to our peers.
That is a great question. In regards to where everybody reports for 2022, accumulation up to that point, that information would not be currently available. It is possible that we could look to see if that information is available for 2021. But the 2022 reports aren't due until April 1st, so there's the state probably wouldn't have that information, but that is something that we could definitely pull for the future.
That would be great. Yeah, just to see what, the previous year, just to give ourselves some useful context. And then on slide 20, I can't tell if it's 20 or 29, the implementation of housing element programs. Do we break down how much each of these different types of services costs, and whether one is particularly way more effective at keeping people housed and keeping displacement down as much as possible, or we think they're all equally effective, or we don't really target money for each type of services, that type of service?
I'm trying to, so the amount of funding that we provide to the consultants is not a significant amount of assistance. There are targets related to the fair housing. ECHO provides fair housing for the entire county. And so there are a targeted number of people that they're supposed to serve related to that annual contract that they have with the county. But it's not broken down per jurisdiction. So the numbers do fluctuate from year to year. But there is funding available. Related to East Bay Community Law Center, I think we do have some targets, and right now it's escaping me what that target is, but I don't know that either ECHO or EBCLC is underperforming.
Yeah.
I will say there was a slowdown during the pandemic, so some of the production numbers were a lot higher. Everybody is gearing up for the fact that the number of people who are probably going to need assistance is going to ramp up with the moratorium on eviction coming to an end in Alameda County. But it is something at least the county does watch very carefully to ensure that people are getting that. I think there's always more assistance that can be provided, but sometimes one of the challenges is that both funding sources and entities only provide assistance to those that are low income. They will answer questions, but when it comes to the deep dive of assistance, it is for low income. So I think it's good to have that resource out there because they can at least answer questions for those that are above 80% of AMI, but it actually does not track or count number of people who contact them who are above those income limits.
Got it. That's super, super helpful. And I guess my other question is, I want to make sure, the maximum number of people in Emeryville are getting the services as possible, and also that we're, getting our bang for our buck. Could, with the money we're giving these nonprofits, could we just send a postcard once a year to every household in Emeryville saying, hey, we do all this cool stuff? Or does this already happen? We're such a small city. It seems like, for, I don't know, $10,000, you could just drop something in everybody's mailbox pretty easily.
I think that's something we can look at. I'd have to look and see if we have the funding to accommodate that, but that's something we can definitely look into for next year.
Right, and I think it would be really good to have, say for ECHO, we had the opportunity to help 40 people, but we only helped 22. I want to make sure that, we're doing everything we can to get help for 18 more people. And I think one thing that we could do is help to advertise that these resources are out there, and we're a small enough city that we could actually do mail or whatever. I don't know, your staff could go knock on every door. There's lots of options for getting help to people who need it. So I'd love to hear, thoughts about how to do that in the future. Yeah. Well, those are all of my questions. Does anybody else have any questions? No? Well, so Charlie, now do we take public comments?
Yes, this would be the time to open the floor for public comment. I do have a little script I can read for that.
Thank you.
Now is the time for the public comment on this item. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to this item should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for me to read your comments into the record. If you are participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press *9 on your phone. This time, I will check to see whether any comments have been received via the online speaker card, comment card, or whether anyone has raised their hand to make audio comments. And I do not have any online speaker cards, and there are no attendees who have raised their hands. So, seeing no additional online speaker cards and no raised hands among the attendees, it would now be appropriate for you to close the public comment on this item.
Okay, great. Well, I will close the public comment, and I think our next item is Planning Commissioner comments.
Before that, Vice Chair Simons, if you could, if there are no further deliberations by the commissioners, if we could get a motion to recommend that the City Council approve this report.
Would anybody like to make that motion? Right, excellent. Go for it.
A second.
So moved.
Right, I hear a motion from Commissioner Henme and a second by Commissioner Graham to recommend that the city council approve this annual report. Commissioner Graham? Commissioner Graham?
Won't there be discussion on the motion?
I'm sorry, there certainly can be. I thought you were ready to vote.
Yeah, Rod, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I had a question on the 5 non-actions that Navarra folks mentioned. And the question, I guess, is, will there be progress on those 5 non-actions? Is there anything happening now, or will there be? And maybe you could pull that slide up if possible.
Sure, hold on just a moment. Let me reconfigure things here on my screen. There we go. So I guess I am not an expert in this because not all of these items are in planning, but actually most of them have something to do with planning. So locating a new police facility, I think there's some discussion of that, but I don't think there's any action on that. I think Charlie can correct me if that's accurate.
I'm not aware of any. I believe the Public Works Department is considering some kind of a future study of all city facilities and some kind of an action plan for what to do with all of them. And this will probably be included in that, but I'm sorry, I don't know what their time frame is for that.
In regarding to installing a creek and water feature along the Greenway, there's been no discussion of that as far as I'm aware. Is that accurate, Charlie? There's
Yes,
not.
Right.
Yeah.
Nothing going on right now.
Yeah, developing these sign regulations, that was underway. There was some movement on that, and then there have been other priorities that have pushed that to the side. So that could happen in the future, but I don't think there's a current timeline for that happening. And then a trail to Emeryville Crescent that has not been studied yet. There is no study planned right now.
Actually, I can chime in on that one.
Oh, okay.
We do have an application for a grant going to the city council at either the next meeting or the one after that from the State Office of Planning and Research to study how to deal with sea level rise around the Emeryville Crescent. And that could include a living levee and possibly a trail. The grant application has not been submitted yet. So after we get council approval to do that, we will be submitting that grant application. I don't know what the time frame will be for that study, but it is in the works.
Thank you, Charlie. And then in terms of farmers market, there has not been anyone I'm aware of approaching the city to locate one in Emeryville, and that has not been a priority for staff to seek that out. However, of course, we do have permitting processes available to make that happen should that opportunity present itself. That would be wonderful. It's just not happening right now.
We did have some farmers markets in the city pre-COVID, and then they kind of all went away during the pandemic, so they haven't come back yet.
Yeah, they actually went away a little bit before the pandemic. There was some intermittent ones. The most recent ones were intermittent at Bay Street, but not like an ongoing regular thing. It was more like a special event. So it just hasn't been Emeryville's a little bit of a difficult place to locate one based on our commute patterns and stuff is what we've been told.
Okay. Yep. So thanks for that. Didn't mean, I think it's highly laudable that we have 58, or actually, I guess, 74 that were completed or progress made. And I guess the reason I'm asking about these is some of these seem like important things to do, or at least try and make some progress or starting progress on. For example, the police facility, that takes years and years to fund and find a site and all those sort of things, and the Greenway Creek seems like a very good idea. So sign regulations are desirable, et cetera. So I guess I'm asking if what happens now, and hopefully that next year we don't have the same 5 actions down as no progress.
Right. Well, I think Charlie's answer about the Emeryville Crescent was a really good one, right? I was like, well, nothing yet. And Charlie's like, well, here's what's going on, but there's all these steps to get to for it to come into fruition. So, next year we might have something on that one, for example, right? And it's the sort of thing where, like, the farmer's market, for example, you don't know. Sometimes these things just come up and it's like, oh, now let's do this, like, let's move on it, right? So, and then some of it has to do with staff capacity also, right? Like, and just what the priorities of council are and moving those forward instead of other things. But agreed, that's why we report on this every year, let you know what's going on, and see where movement is happening and isn't happening in the city. Like, one that didn't make progress for the past 2 years was increasing transit service. Because of COVID, that was not possible. Transit service got reduced and now it started going back up again. So some progress was made on that, but that was something that we had to list as no progress for the past 2 years. So things are also circumstantial.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much for that great question, Rod. Any other questions from any other commissioners? Good. Okay. Well, it sounds like we had a motion coming.
We had a motion by
that shot again.
Yes, we had a motion by Commissioner Henry and seconded by Commissioner Dram. Are you all ready to vote now? All right, Commissioner Dram?
Aye.
Commissioner Gitzoni?
Aye.
Commissioner Henry?
Aye.
Commissioner Wax?
Aye.
Vice Chair Simons?
Aye.
And Chair Chafe is absent. So 5 ayes. The motion is approved. We will forward this report to the City Council with your recommendation that it be approved for submittal to the state. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlie. Let me just find our agenda here. So now we get to have item 9, Planning Commissioner comments. Does anybody have any comments? Commissioner Dram.
So what we see in the agenda and the files from the website is a little different with the presentation. I want to know if it's possible we can have a copy of the presentations too.
Usually the presentations aren't prepared until right before the meeting. So we can certainly provide them to you after the meeting if that is sufficient.
Yeah, that would be perfect, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Henry.
Yes, my question's on the objective standards. And having had quite a bit of experience with this as an architect from other cities. And I wondered, I haven't seen them, is the draft available for us to see?
There is not a draft yet. The commission actually did have a study session on this, but I think it was probably before most of you were on the commission. It was a couple of years ago. We are anticipating bringing them to you for a study session. I don't remember exactly when, but it's soon. Navarre, do you recall, is it May or sometime in the not too distant future? We will be bringing the objective standards to you for a study session.
Well, the last time it came was in June 2021, and I don't think it will be May. I think June is our current target.
For a study session?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, I have to assess the calendar.
That's the goal. Coincidentally, Valerie Navarre and I all attended a workshop just today that was put on by the Alameda County Housing Consortium or Collaborative. on objective development standards. So we got to share information with all the other cities in Alameda County as to what they're doing and where they are. And I will say that only a couple of cities have actually adopted them so far. Most of the other cities are in the process, as are we.
Yeah, I worked, for example, I worked on a project in Santa Rosa where they have adopted objective standards.
I would just note that we already have objective standards, really. In fact, we have already approved 2 SB 35 projects, which were based on our objective standards. It's just that they're not codified in our code as a specific section that says these are the objective standards.
I see.
So we need to do that, and we also are going to embellish them a bit. So things like FAR and height and setback, anything like that, those are all objective standards. Parking requirements, you know, they're measurable, they're specific, they're numerical, they're objective, you know. And so we have a lot of objective standards in our code right now. They just haven't been identified specifically as such. So we're working on that.
Well, the ones that have the biggest impact on design are the formal objective standards, like, you know, every 30 feet you have to have a 2-foot recess, 5 feet wide, and all that sort of stuff. Alameda, the city of Alameda is the other one that I've worked with on objective standards. So those are the ones that I'm particularly interested in seeing what you're proposing.
Yes, understood. And Alameda is one of the, I think, 2 or 3 cities in Alameda County that has adopted the objective standards already.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
You might want to look at the recording of the objective standards visit to Planning Commission from June 2021. And then also it went to City Council for a study session after that. So I presume that was in July of 2021, but I don't have that date directly in front of me. We could provide that to you.
Yes, I'll make a note to send an email to all of you with the link to those 2 study sessions.
Great, thanks.
Excellent. Any other commissioner comments? No? Well, folks, we're doing a great job here. 7:22, finishing up before 7:30. Let me scroll to the adjournment part of the meeting here. So I guess we can adjourn at 7:22 p.m. And we'll see you all next month on March 23rd.
In person.
In
the
person.
council chambers.
Can't wait.
All right.
Then.
Then. Bye.
Bye.
Happy birthday, Henry.
Thank you.
Yes,
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.